Okay, thought I'd just should make that. It's a bit awkward with me because I'm using a TV as the screen. The aspect ratio is a bit wrong, but thought I'd just go into some of the making of this. The film's already done, but just as extra kind of, I guess, brownie points or whatever, go over it. I've never done this before. I don't even know what I'm to say really, but so this is the script. It's literally only a first draft. No, I'll start with scene 3 because it's the first scene I wrote. It's the first scene I filmed, and it's the first scene I edited. Right here. So basically, this scene came about. I was actually on the bus, and I was thinking about how I'm gonna write this, and I can start with. I know I have these two characters. I know how they're going to interact. Hello. I know how they're going to interact. I know what they think of each other. I know that at this point in the film that they've had the initial meeting between the two of them. They've had that sort of both disliking each other, and I know at the end they need to sort of get used to each other. So this is the point where they're sort of on the fence with each other. So they still dislike each other, but they've gotten to the point of sort of a mutual understanding and almost relying on each other. So within this scene I need to show that they're kind of getting along, they're living with each other, their standard bickering, getting on the same page occasionally, and then sort of refusing it. They're still sort of, even though they're finding comfort in each other's company because they're both lonely characters, they're still fighting it. So I started with this scene, and I remember just sort of thinking on the bus of how the conversation's gonna go, what they're talking about, and I knew I wanted to interject lots of tangents, because how many times are you having a conversation and you go off on one thing and then another and another. I find that in a lot of films, you sort of they stick to they're talking about one thing. I've never had that, I don't think, in my life. I'm always talking about 6 different things at once, so I wanted to try and do that as best as possible. At the start of this, it's just sort of setting the scene. My spelling's probably terrible in here, you'll probably find something, but this is basically how I write scripts. I don't necessarily start at the beginning. I come back and forwards between lots of different scripts. I've got several which are like half done, and loads of others sort of just jotted down brief notes, and some I haven't even written notes for yet, and I really need to, else I will forget them. Oddly, I like starting a scene with "From Black We Hear." I don't know why, that's just a preference I have. I like doing that for some reason. I like having some sort of audio cue at the start of a scene before we have any visual cue. That's just me. I do a very short sort of what the scene is, what's going on, sort of just setting the image, because I could see the two of them just sat on the sofa at night watching TV. I like to play with words a lot as well, like one man is pale and tired looking, wide-eyed, and the other is dead. So sort of, I don't know, it just keeps me interested. Play with it a bit. I try and use lots of, so at the start here, this bit, just for myself I set, right, this is the ghost. It says Ben and Jerry here as my two characters. That wasn't actually from the ice cream. That was something that was pointed out to me later on, so that was very strange. But so I use lots of beats and pause. Yeah, see, there's pause down here. I thought, so the main chunk of the scene, because the point of the scene is just to show who these two characters are, what type of characters the two of them are, and the relationship between the two. But that's all sort of subtext. The text itself is, the main conversational arc is Ben finding out what Jerry did at work, or what he did that day. But that's boring as all hell, so I went off onto lots of different tangents. So you have at the start sort of not even on the same page at all in any way, just he asks the question and then they go off on one of just not listening, and literally talking about not listening by not listening to each other. I think it was 3 times during this scene that I've done sort of shooting him a type of look. I don't know why, I felt like the various degrees of looks set throughout the structure of this one scene was sort of up it a bit. I use Word, I don't use any sort of script formatting, so this is just how I format scripts. Reaction from him, I don't know, sort of showing these characters of who they are. I know I'm going off on one, and I don't really have a clear aim for what I'm even doing, but so he's saying that he wants an apology, seriously, when he doesn't give a shit. He's just toying with him, essentially. He's bored, he's a bored character, I'm a bored person, that's what I write. So now it comes back to what did you do today? But then immediately after that, so we sort of start to go into the main sort of what, just asking question of what he's doing today, but immediately go back out of it again onto another tangent of saying that I've been stuck in 4 walls for 20 years, and that spinning off into it's 5 years or whatever. This bit I'm not happy with. This sort of almost monologue, not happy with that. This is the first draft. I didn't get a chance to do a second draft, mostly because of timing, and also the last shot I was supposed to do ended up getting delayed because I did 3 drafts of the script and then didn't have time to actually film it, so that got delayed. This is just them sort of being playfully hating each other. It's I wrote it almost homoerotic. I don't know why. I just kind of felt like there's that sort of this does sound weird, but kind of just in that kind of sort of jokey male friendship, kind of saying something sarcastically endearing or something like that. I remember saying that to my actor and he was like, what the fuck does endearing even mean? So, but yeah, it was funny. Still talking about 5, then they go on about how it's an indent or an extent. I do a lot of repetitiveness. Lots of people don't like that kind of thing. I do. So I have him saying extent. There's another section actually. Of course, it's still going on about Y6, but oh yeah. So Ben's saying the door doesn't count. Jerry responding with the door doesn't count, and then again with Barry, softly spoken this time, the door doesn't count. That's just satisfying to me. I can't really give a reason for it. It's just very satisfying. And then at that point I'd stick in a pause, but where I'm trying to get to, see, it's still lots of tangents going off on things. Now they've finally gotten back onto getting to work. He says he went to work and he got the bus, and he's saying he got it with Jem. Then that goes off on another thing. The whole violin joke, I couldn't resist that, honestly. It popped into my head and I just wanted it. 2003 called, 2005 wants that one too. Very bickering. I picture these two as kind of, even though it's a man living with a ghost who's been dead for 20 years, I picture it more of an old married couple who's they're both in their like 70s and they just sort of kind of despise each other. talking about the girls on the bus. This bit. So they're talking about the different accents. So I have them. This when they start to agree. So they start to slowly agree. We have lots of half sentences where they're not quite finishing it, and it leads to this point where they say it at the same time. Basically, that's just supposed to represent that they are on the same page at this point. So we're starting to get that whole sort of they're agreeing with each other, and they get completely on the same page. So these are very similar characters. So it's almost ironic why they sort of despise each other. And then they come out of saying it same thing, and then that's when it darts off again. So they've gotten onto the same page. They do kind of like each other in a weird way, but they're refusing it, and then that's when it goes off onto coming straight out of that as quickly as possible and into the argument and the storm out scene. So that's basically how I wrote that scene. It needs a lot of work, but you know, it gets the point across. I think largely in the subtext of I don't know if anyone would pick up on it, but that's what I was thinking of when writing it, is the subtext behind that scene of where these characters are. Yeah, he gets up to leave. The door slams, ending this discussion. I don't like that either. Just ending this discussion, really? That's how I wrote that? Okay. I came across a script today in my old files, which I wrote maybe a year ago. It was the second episode of a TV series I started writing, and I got maybe a couple pages into the second episode, and I just sort of, when I go back to writing that, I really like that opening I wrote. So now seeing this, which is something that I wrote much more recently, it's kind of weird, since I feel like what I wrote a year ago was much better. I guess I spent a lot of time on that. The first episode as well. First episode I spent a good chunk of time when this was very rushed. This was the entire of this scene, which is scene 3, was written. I thought about it on the bus to college. I jotted down notes quickly as they came into my head on my phone in the memo page. Got into college, went straight to the library, typed up this scene, and that's pretty much how it stayed. Went through a couple changes, just little things, but that's mostly how it stayed. And then I got home, and that's when I did the start point, and then the ending as well, which was scene 4 and 5, which is the ending. Yeah. Now, to me in the past, talking about the location. Okay, so I don't have any footage of the second day of production, or kind of the third day of production, which was only like 3 shots for the start of scene 1, that interview section at the beginning of the film. Film went pretty good. First day we got a lot done. We got both scene 3 and 4 done, which are the 2 longest scenes. Second day had a few problems. I mean, first day had a problem, but not that bad at all really. It was just to do with the lighting, because of filming out of order. To save time, you do all the wides and mids and then close-ups. Forgot about the turning off the TV, which was a second large LED light panel, so that was a bit too much white light for scene 3, but yeah, it's alright. Day 2 though, different locations. That was scene 5 first, in the same location. Then we transported all of the equipment to the second location and filmed scene 2 and then half of scene 1. That's when problems happened. We left equipment behind. The blood, complicated as hell, really to do. I still have loads of it actually. Like, literally still have bags of this stuff. It smells horrible, honestly. It's edible though. It is technically edible. I thought the blood looked really good. It was the right consistency that I wanted. It was the right color. It's just just tricky actually filming it. Had to with 2 of the shots, I literally just had to tell my cast and crew to go take a break as I figure it out, and filmed it by myself with no one else around. I'm just playing with this now. But yeah, it went well for the most part. I thought my actors did a great job. Cameron and Matthew, just pleasure to work with, really great. Dom and Ozzy, who was my crew, I've worked with before. They're great at it. So yeah, for the most part, it went really well. Day 2 though was very run and gun style filming, which I'm not really a fan of. I like everything to be planned out. Day 1 I had every shot I wanted for scene 3, every shot I wanted for scene 4. That was all marked out. I knew what I was filming, in what order. I did have shot lists for the rest of the scenes. It just sort of very stretched on time. I could tell that my actors were getting distracted and sort of, yeah, so that was trying to get it done as quickly as possible on that day. But yeah, I think for the most part it worked out. Editing, nightmare. Hate editing. Editing is the worst thing ever. Gets to the point where it's just so tedious and I hate it so much that I just rush it as fast as I can. So I don't know how well my mic is picking me up, but I try and rush it as much as possible, which is a bad thing to do when editing is such a massive part of filmmaking. Pre-production, production and post-production, the editing, such an essential part, and I rush it. So that's not great. Editing is definitely always my biggest problem. But yeah, should have another potentially 4 films this year coming. This is my 2nd of the year. Should have another 4 coming, hopefully. And then I've started planning something for the year of 2020, which should be quite big and my first actual budget behind a project. So yeah, that's exciting, and got lots of stuff to work on still.